Pro football today. Let's make it happen. We're live on SportsGrid with you for another Sunday of NFL action. I'm Kevin Walsh. I'm joined, of course, by both Donnie Rightside and Joe Lisi. And, man, usually the excitement on a Sunday is palpable. We've been waiting for these games. I think we've already played about 14 games this week of NFL action. We had the Christmas special on Wednesday. We had a Thursday nighter. Then last night, another three-piece, all Lisi with playoff implications.
Yeah, and the games yesterday in terms of the afternoon and late night were competitive. The first game that played out, L.A. becomes a playoff team. They knock off New England, and it sets the stage for today. Not the best slate, but it sets the stage for playoff implications in the AFC and the NFC, and then the marquee game, Donnie, at 4 o'clock, Minnesota, Green Bay. Something has to give. Minnesota fighting for that number one overall seed. Last time they played in Lambeau, very close game. Minnesota won 31-29.
Also, a lot of things that we're starting to determine through Week 17 and Week 18 who needs what, which means, the career numbers. I'm not talking about, hey, this guy needs, $50,000 incentive to catch 2 balls. You look at Mike Evans, one of the best runs in the history of the NFL. Needs, a couple hundred yards over the final 2 games. I do think he has a good game today. Saquon Barkley probably on that pedestal today going up against the Dallas Cowboys. And also the Eagles need a victory to secure that number 2 seed and not have this linger into Week 18 and all the questions that will come up last year. Kenny Pickett at quarterback. But yesterday also, the Chargers looked fantastic against the Patriots, easily dispatching them 40-7. You had some interesting game calls here with the Bengals and clock management, which almost cost them the game and a possible trip to the playoffs as they win. And then the Rams at night. The Rams are winning football games, but they aren't doing it impressively. So something to look forward to the future. Maybe they win that division. But we had a lot to talk about, include the weather conditions today some places. Woo, boy.
Ooh, juicy.
Man.
No, I think it's the opposite of juicy. I believe the weather is not all that great out there.
Well, it is juicy.
It's juicy for maybe some totals. You never know.
Again, nothing breeds over like we can't complete a pass.
Correct.
Speaking of can't complete a pass, we have some injuries at the quarterback position. One quarterback who usually doesn't complete many passes, Anthony Richardson, out for the Indianapolis Colts. And then for the Miami Dolphins, the only quarterback on that roster that can complete a pass is Tua Tagovailoa. Out of nowhere, he's injured and likely not going to play for the Miami Dolphins today. Both of those teams' games matter a ton today due to Cincinnati's win over Denver. I'll ask you first, Lisi, how much do you think the Colts and Dolphins will be impacted without their starting quarterbacks?
I think the Dolphins will be impacted. I don't think the Colts as much. And even though Joe Flacco struggled when he was implemented as the starter after they sat Anthony Richardson, still a veteran quarterback, we saw that the New York Giants got absolutely abused by Atlanta last week in terms of a rookie quarterback. Drew Lock threw 2 interceptions, critical to just getting blown out 34-7. As long as you have Jonathan Taylor in the rushing attack, I think Indy will be just fine. But when you look at Miami, yes, they knocked off San Francisco, but they did it with the ground attack, short to intermediate throws with Tua. Now you go on the road, even though it's balmy, 50 degrees, a little bit rainy in terms of the forecast, they're going to have to run the football on that front seven of Cleveland. That's still a strength of the Cleveland front seven. And Huntley's going to have to make some plays. Without Waddle and Hill in that lineup, I don't know if they're a 6.5-point favorite. Total drop from 39.5 to now 33.5 in the market. So that's how big of a drop-off it is in terms of the productivity from Tua to Huntley.
Yeah, also brutal weather they're expected in Cleveland. So we're looking at a ground game and 2 scrambling quarterbacks and not much of a passing effort. But also keep in mind, too, we talk about the Colts. You're actually gaining a quarterback as opposed to an extra running back, so I don't think it's going to affect them one bit, and that passing game should open up. Now, Flacco hasn't been great this year, but I'm pretty sure he's going to get over 6 completions today, and if they score 40 points, he's probably going to be a big deal over there. So for my money, I don't think the Miami-Cleveland game is going to be all that fun to watch, but I do think there's a chance that we get points from Indy today in the Meadowlands.
I will say that, truly, I think Flacco puts the Colts as more likely to be upset because they are more likely than just throw the football, and he is far more likely to turn it over. Again, the difference in terms of who they are as passers is inarguable, right? Mm-hmm. Even Flacco at his age.
Yeah.
But if Shane Steichen's like, man, you know what? This is kind of fun. We can, throw it downfield a little, and then Flacco throws a pick 6 to start the game, which is what I believe he did against Buffalo, if memory serves, and then all of a sudden the Giants are in front. Because here's the thing. You might say, but the Giants don't want to win. And there's a lot of teams that don't want to win, and then they keep finding ways to win. The Raiders were celebrating up and down last week, and their fan base was like, what are you doing?
Yeah, owner.
What are you doing? Why? By the way, the Raiders are favorites this week, if anybody would like to know how far the Saints season has fallen.
Had a bad travel date. I heard they left off at about midnight last night. So not supposedly it won't affect the performance. Hopefully the defense is a sieve today.
Speaking, though, of missing quarterbacks, the biggest is the fact that the Philadelphia Eagles today will be without Jalen Hurts. Nick Sirianni, if you include the Washington game, though I know Hurts got the start, is 0-3 without Hurts in his career. Again, we know the story on Sirianni. The winning percentage is as good as any coach in NFL history. But without Jalen Hurts, Donnie, it's not been fruitful for Philly. They're, in some spots, laying over a touchdown against Dallas.
Yes, and this line was 9.5 early in the week, which was a Jalen Hurts line. Dips down to around 7. I still think the Eagles, we'll talk about this much more later. We're going to throttle the Dallas Cowboys today, but it is tough. Like Jalen Hurts in a game where you have that read option and he could throw the football off of it really hamstrings the defense. Now they're just going to be centered in on trying to stop Saquon Barkley, and maybe you get some of those drip drabs over the middle where those receivers, talking about Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown, can certainly make some plays. I'm not worried about the Eagles losing the football game today, but it is a clear drop-off in quarterback play that you're going to get from the style that you had with Jalen Hurts and also now with Kenny Pickett at this point, Jim.
I think they rely on their defense. Even though their defense gave up the game in terms of the final minutes against Jaden Daniels, they still were opportunistic. Won the turnover battle 5-1. I expect they could force turnovers against Cooper Rush. Even though Dallas got the victory on Sunday night over Baker Mayfield in Tampa, they couldn't run the football consistently. Dowdle only had 23 yards on the ground. I don't expect Cooper Rush to light up that secondary. C.D. Lamb's banged up. He's out, so you got to rely on Cooks and Jake Ferguson to potentially challenge that defense. I look for a lower scoring game. I look for Kenny Pickett to work within the offense. Look for Saquon to run the football, maybe to Donnie's point, 25, maybe 30 times. And I think this game resembles maybe a 20-6, 20-10 type of a grind-out win for the Eagles. I just don't think the Eagles will be challenged. But again, it is a step-up spot. It's a divisional opponent. You lost last week. You want to get back on track, especially at home. Even though Jalen Hurts isn't there, it's a step-up spot in front of the home crowd.
I wonder if, to some degree, Dallas kind of got the word from Jerry last week. Hey, guys, great season. You'll all be back. Because CD gets now over 100 receptions, shutting him down for the season, right? And it is in Dallas's best interest to lose this game. Dallas finding a way to finish this season over 500, it's not necessary because McCarthy has probably already kept his job. Whether you think he should or should not, I don't think he should. I think Dallas should keep themselves to a different standard. They're not going to do so, but nevertheless, I think that's one of the interesting aspects of this game, and I think it speaks to why the line is what it is, because it is hard to imagine, what's a point spread gap between Hurts and Kenny Pickett, right? Maybe call it 4 points. I mean, Philly laying 11.5 would still look really sizable to the Dallas Cowboys, but man, Donnie, you go up and down the injury report for them, it is absolutely brutal. I'd be remiss if I did not, though, bring up the biggest game on this slate today, which is going to be, as you should expect, in the NFC North, Minnesota Vikings and the Green Bay Packers. Donnie, one more Minnesota win keeps Week 18, the division on the line, the 1 seed on the line. One team will be the 1 in Detroit, and Minnesota, the other will be the 5 seed.
Yeah, again, like a 15-2 team that you're lining up to see. I mean, look, Minnesota's getting disrespected on that line. Real quick on the Philadelphia Eagles game, Dallas is playing hard. Dallas wasn't eliminated till right up to a kick last week. Game plan in there. Players are playing. They know they go. This week, they know they're eliminated. Yeah. We'll see if they have that juice. But Minnesota, to me, I love them today, Joe. I'm sorry.
They entered this game winning 8 straight. Green Bay has won 5 of the last 6, so it's going to be a dynamic game a little bit later.
Jordan Love has been very good at protecting the football. Last time he played them, 3 interceptions. But we're going to talk a little bit about yesterday and that big Cincinnati victory.
As the candles flicker, a new tradition shines. 8 nights of Hanukkah, 8 nights of winning insights.
They may come out slow, so you might be able to get a better number. Wow, they're favored.
With SportsGrid, every night is another chance to win.
No pick sixes today, they cover. So let's crunch it up. Let's make it happen. Let's give you our favorite props.
Let your Hanukkah winnings brighten your celebrations. Happy Hanukkah from all of us at SportsGrid.
How do you find some of this great talent that you've brought in, who are still early in their career, might not have a ton of tape on them yet?
I've been around this business, man, for almost 20 years. So a lot of these guys will tell you that I popped into a lot of gyms, sparred, or just worked on the side, or, kind of worked out, just watching. I've always loved this sport, man. I think it's the greatest. And we want to continue to put on the next up-and-coming superstars. We know we got them.
Only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
All right, Pro Football Today. We're live right here on SportsGrid. And yesterday, the Saturday slate of NFL, it did end up delivering, well, all the games at times can be tough to get through, it feels like, to some degree. But the final quarter plus overtime of Cincinnati and Denver was one of the better moments of the NFL season. And it kept the Bengals' hopes alive, along with Miami and Indianapolis. It means now that the Denver Broncos are going to have to win their football game almost assuredly in Week 18 against the Kansas City Chiefs, because they would then need Miami and Indianapolis to lose one of the next two, and Cincinnati. It's just, they need to win that football game. So much played out. So many decisions that people are uncertain of by coaches there. What was your biggest takeaway, Donnie, from Cincinnati-Denver?
That the Bengals are a scary team if they get into the playoffs, because that offense can play with anybody. But at the same time, you see the deficiencies in that defense, including late on a 4th and 1. You throw it up in the air, one guy's going to make a play between two defenders, and they wind up in extras. And also, you take a look at the field goal kicker, which you're not supposed to worry about, but late in the season, missing clutch kicks from like 30 yards off the upright, that can't happen. But for my money, the Broncos probably played it the way. I didn't think the Broncos would win this football game, and they didn't. But as we talked about earlier, Kansas City on deck, Week 18 at home. You should be able to handle your business. But for me, I don't think the Bengals are getting there. But also, Kevin, from a side point larger, T. Higgins, 11 for 131, 3 touchdowns. They basically told this man before the season, we're not going to pay you here. Unbelievable, Joe.
It really is. And you heard Joe Burrow after the game step up and say how important T. Higgins was to the offense. They supposedly has the same agent as Jamar Chase, so whether a deal gets done remains to be seen. But at the end of the day, if you're Cincinnati, you better have one of those players on your sidelines to allow Joe Burrow to throw the football in terms of 2025. If they're going to make the playoffs, I agree with Donnie. Potentially, they could go toe-to-toe with anybody. They're still an incomplete football team, have concerns about Zach Taylor as a head coach, have major concerns about the defense. But as long as Joe Burrow throws for 412, 3 touchdowns, and you have T. Higgins and Jamar Chase healthy, and you see Gesicki with 80, 90 yards yesterday, they could go toe-to-toe with any defense in terms of the AFC.
Yeah, Burrow is having a MVP caliber season, undeniably. I think there is an argument that he deserves league MVP. He very well could finish this season with 5,000 passing yards and 45-plus touchdowns. I mean, that's MVP level. Without a question. How many rushing touchdowns does he have? Does he have a chance for 50 total? He'd need 6 total touchdowns. I don't know. He probably get it, right?
Who do they have? Is it
Pittsburgh. Which, I mean, listen, if he finishes with 5,000 yards and 50 total touchdowns, But I don't know.
But again, you look at the team, though. Like, Joe Burrow is the best player in football, probably. Like, if you said right now, I need one quarterback, it would take Patrick Mahomes, let's just say remove him. It's Joe Burrow, and it's by a landslide. This team's 500.
Yeah.
This guy is lighting up the scoreboard every week, and his defense is so bad. Like, that organization, if they would have spent any money on defense to go, we're going to have a middling defense, they probably have the number 1 overall seed.
That's what
middling defense.
That's what they thought they had, though, right? Entering the season, that's what carried them to back-to-back AFC championships.
I think it's a Cincinnati team, though, where because they don't control their own destiny, right? And I know that's going to be tough for them.
Yeah.
But you mentioned something with T. Higgins, and to me, and I know this will be unpopular coming off of a game with 11, 131, and 3, they shouldn't even consider signing him for 1 second. If Joe Burrow is as good as he is,
correct,
which he is, and Chase is as good as he is,
and you got Burton now,
which he is, there is no way Joe Burrow needs the best receiver in football or second best and another guy who's like top 12. There's no way. Higgins and Chase are both better than any player on Kansas City's offense, any player on Buffalo's offense, and outside of Derrick Henry, any player on Baltimore's offense. There is absolutely no – because, Lisi, we're sat here like, why are things so bad? Because people want every single penny of this football team paid to Burrow, Chase, and Higgins.
Yeah.
You can't build a team that way.
No, you have to do it through scouting in college, right? So look at Brian Thomas. Look at Malik Neighbors, right? Look at the seasons that they're performing. You could allow.
They need to stop looking at receivers. They need to start looking at guys that play on defense.
No, yes, but my point is to make up for the productivity. If T. Higgins is going to walk out that door, you have to draft accordingly and draft right to make sure that those players hit the ground. Now, they did that. They did that with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. So to your point, if they're going to allow him to walk out the door, and you believe that Joe Burrow, and I do as well, can make everybody around him better because he's an elite MVP caliber type of quarterback, then you let him go. You draft accordingly and find a second or a third rounder or potentially wherever you get your pick of an elite wide receiver coming out of college, and you develop him. And at the end of the day, you also have Yoshi Voss there that has stepped up for the most part in terms of that offense. You have Gesicki. You could get somebody through free agency potentially. But at the end of the day, the defense has really let this team down. And it started week 1. When you lose to the New England Patriots and that type of offense, that really catapulted the whole season. It started on the wrong foot. They never recovered since that point.
It is good. Like, if they say, okay, let's keep T. Higgins. You know what that means for Cincinnati fans? That means Mike Brown goes, well, I'm just not going to pay Jamar Chase this year. We'll see how he treats that going into the next year. And also, from a defensive standpoint, they have one of the best edge pass rushers in football as a sack artist, and they can't get stops. It's incredible how much of a sieve they are.
They also have a defensive coordinator that we heard for years deserved the head coaching job.
Yep.
In Lou Anarumo. So that also is a part of this puzzle. The other takeaway I had from this game, fair or unfair, is Cincinnati is dangerous and in a one-game situation can beat anyone.
True.
They are not going on a Eli Manning Giants run from the 7th seed.
No.
Because they cannot separate against any team with a pulse.
No, they can't. They allow Bo Nix right back into that ballgame, right? They pull ahead. They have the fourth quarter lead. You allow them to go down the length of the field in, a minute 24, score a touchdown, not even a field goal.
Yep.
I mean, that's a rookie quarterback that just tore your defense apart in terms of a playoff type of situation. What would a quarterback like Josh Allen, Pat Mahomes do in that type of situation? That's why they're not going anywhere. They might get in and might strike an upset in terms of the first round, but outside of that, you can't back them long-term for any type of odds.
Yeah, they would have been fun to have in the playoffs from a prop betting perspective and a game total perspective, but they're just not good enough to be there. Your record is what it says it is. It's 8-8 on the outside looking in. Need a miracle to get in now.
And that is the ironic part of this all. Like, Denver loses. We're getting wait, what? The Colts are in? Let's talk a little bit more about Denver as well as the Chargers clinching their spot and the Rams essentially doing the same next.
As the candles flicker, a new tradition shines. 8 nights of Hanukkah, 8 nights of winning insights.
Like, they may come out slow, so you might be able to get a better number. Wow, they're favored.
With SportsGrid, every night is another chance to win.
No pick sixes today. They cover.
So let's crunch it up. Let's make it happen. Let's give you our favorite props.
Let your Hanukkah winnings brighten your celebrations. Happy Hanukkah from all of us at SportsGrid.
How do you find some of this great talent that you've brought in, who are still early in their career, might not have a ton of tape on them yet?
I've been around this business, man, for almost 20 years. So a lot of these guys will tell you that I popped into a lot of gyms, sparred or just worked on the side or, kind of worked out, just watching. I've always loved this sport, man. I think it's the greatest. And we want to continue to put on the next up-and-coming superstars. We know we got them.
Only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Back to right here. It is Pro Football Today. And again, on the Cincinnati side, we shall see. But making the playoffs for the Bengals still requires a lot of help that goes beyond beating Denver. That's what happens when you lose every one-possession game and to the New England Patriots and, what was it, the Steelers, because they let Russ throw for 400 yards, who's looked lifeless outside of that game. There's a lot there.
Baltimore,
okay?
2 games.
Yeah, by 3 and by, 1? They lost to Kansas City by 1. Not great. I mean, the Eagles smashed them. The Denver Broncos, though, Donnie, do control their own destiny.
Yes.
When you watch that game yesterday from Denver, how dangerous do you think they might actually be in a potential playoff setting?
Not dangerous at all.
Yeah.
Because the rookie quarterback, if they won their division, would be at home. That's your buffering point right there. The rookie's now going to have to go on the road and win it. And I loved what I saw to Bo Nix yesterday. Struggled for the first half. Pulled himself up here and had a legitimate chance to win that game on the road in a meaningful game for both teams. It wasn't as if they were playing, let's just say, the New York Giants were at it. Hey, great comeback. Like, no, that's a quality team that you beat on the road, which ended up losing that game. But for me, I just look at them. And for me, the Colts would be more dangerous. The Chargers getting in, obviously now it looks like they will do that. They're going to be more dangerous or would have been more dangerous. And then the Cincinnati Bengals. I actually think on the trigger point of if you make the playoffs, Denver's the team I least worry about if I'm going up against them. And it sounds unfair because they've had a solid season. They have good defense. The quarterback is playing much better. And they have a Super Bowl championship, head coach there. But for me, I wouldn't worry about that team as much as just say the Bengals.
No, I agree. And the reason why, to Donnie's point, look at the quarterback position, right? The experience of Justin Herbert, the experience of Joe Burrow, the experience of Josh Allen, and even Joe Flacco, right? That they would have to go up against, just squashes what Bo Nix is right now. And that's not a knock on him. He's playing very well. Yeah. But Sean Payton showed you in a playoff type of situation how he would approach in terms of a playoff game. First half dictated everything. 7-3, right? He wants to run the football. He wants to shorten the game, short to intermediate throws. He doesn't want Bo Nix to turn the football over, even though Bo Nix at times has been able to throw over the top of opposing defenses. He wants a very conservative game plan. Let's try and win it 17-13 as opposed to what you had yesterday, 30-24. And that is the Achilles heel and the weakness of why they won't go far. Is this a stepping stone? It's possible. Look at what happened when Jacksonville knocked off the L.A. Chargers, right? The hope was in year number 2 that you could elevate and get to an AFC championship game. They didn't do that, But with Bo Nix, they have the potential. Again, if they could get into the playoffs, play it well, see if they can get a win. But at the end of the day, I think they're a one and done. Maybe they strike an upset just due to matchup, depending upon who they play, but they're not going very far.
I mean, they're likely going to be over a touchdown underdog against Buffalo in round number 1 if they get there. So no one will get. But I will say this. Sean Payton is not in the Coach of the Year race, largely because it's just going to go to Kevin O'Connell because he's got Sam Darnold playing good football. But, man, a potential 10-win season with Bo Nix as his starting quarterback is quite the job out of Sean Payton. Let's keep it in division quickly. We'll have time to get to the LA Rams, but the Chargers did clinch their spot. And I imagine the feeling around the Chargers compared to Denver will be much different in terms of whether or not this Chargers team is dangerous, not only, Donnie, because of what they do, but I know you've been saying for weeks, right now the expectation, I think, for L.A. is they will draw kind of what you've labeled a target matchup in the Texans in round 1.
Correct. And also, you're now looking at a team from where they were a few weeks ago till now. The reason I bring that up is Herbert looks great. 26 of 38 for 281, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions yesterday. Now, granted, they went up against the Patriots, who are a dead football team, but you still got to pound that team. That was a work week where you're going from West Coast to East Coast, early afternoon game. Sometimes they're trip-up spots for those West Coast teams. Didn't happen. But you know what I like? Ladd McConkey's getting better every week. Quentin Johnston's actually catching the football. Stone Smart is coming on as a backup tight end. You get Disley back here. Again, it's not Rob Gronkowski, but It's another weapon. But also, the calling card for Jim Harbaugh teams is give me a running back that can tote it. And yesterday, I didn't really know how to treat J.K. Dobbins coming back. Comes back on the IR, limited practices. I said, boy, is that going to be a 8 to 10 yards a carry, or 8 to 10 yard carries here? Is that going to be 15 or 16 carries for him in the game? No, it turned out to be 19 for 76 and a touchdown. If he is healthy, completely changes the dynamic for the Chargers offense and sets the tone here. I don't know if they're dangerous per se, but boy, you got Herbert and Harbaugh heading down the path in a playoff game. They're going to be coached right. They're going to be in it.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the reason why, you look at what they did yesterday, 4 yards per carry, 147 yards on the ground. They grind you out. Defense bounces back with a big effort. Statistically, a couple of weeks ago, number 1 ranked scoring defense. I think they're there, and it's because of Harbaugh. You get him in a big game type of situation, he could strike the upset against anyone.
It's been a great year for the L.A. Chargers.
Yes.
We'll see what the future holds. We'll talk about the Rams in a bit. A potential opponent could be the Packers or the Vikings. We get your game of the day next.
As the candles flicker, a new tradition shines. 8 nights of Hanukkah, 8 nights of winning insights.
They may come out slow, so you might be able to get a better number. Wow, they're favored.
With SportsGrid, every night is another chance to win.
No pick sixes today. They cover. So let's crunch it up. Let's make it happen. Let's give you our favorite props.
Let your Hanukkah winnings brighten your celebrations. Happy Hanukkah from all of us at SportsGrid.
How do you find some of this great talent that you've brought in, who are still early in their career, might not have a ton of tape on them yet?
I've been around this business, man, for almost 20 years. So a lot of these guys will tell you that I popped into a lot of gyms, sparred or just worked on the side or, kind of worked out, just watching. I've always loved this sport, man. I think it's the greatest. And we want to continue to put on the next up-and-coming superstars. We know we got them.
Only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Back right here, Pro Football Today. The best game on this board is going to come a little bit later today between Minnesota and Green Bay.
Mm-hmm.
And let me just tell you this. If by some chance you out there still think the NFL fixes games, bet Minnesota and go to sleep. Because, boy, do they hope the Vikings win this game so they get their Sunday nighter, Week 18. Winner's the 1 seed in Minnesota, Detroit. Loser goes to the 5. Because otherwise, Week 18 is going to look a little rough in terms of clinching scenarios here. But for the Minnesota Vikings, they are a favorite, not by a lot. Laying just 1.5 in some spots. You, though, Donnie, believe we will get the Week 18 drama. You like the Vikings in this game.
I do, and I don't understand, to be honest, why the line is this low. Now, granted, algorithms go into it. They're not just making lines up. They're there for a reason, I like to say. But it seems like all season long, it's like, well, we're just waiting on Minnesota. Maybe they can get hot at this point. Like, they're one of the best teams in football and not priced accordingly in this game. And if you are looking at the Green Bay Packers, yes, they're a good team. But heading into the season, Green Bay felt like, Joe, it was going to be that darling team that everybody loves to bet, and everybody's like, just wait till Green Bay gets to the playoffs. And all the while in this division, all the way through, it's always been Detroit on the top of the staff here, and then you talked about Green Bay. Nobody was talking about Minnesota. When I say nobody, of course, right. People were bringing them up, but not on the stage that those two teams are. And I see that line today, opened up at 1.5, still sits at 1.5. And I have to say, what am I missing here?
Well, I just think it's perception, number one. The first time they played, it was a 2-point game, 31-29. That was the first time that Jordan Love did get hurt. He came back. He was a little rusty. Sam Darnold and that offense built 28-0 first half lead. That was the game Jordan Love in the fourth quarter comes back. He throws for 389 in the fourth quarter, almost pulls it out. They lose by 2 points, right? And I just think that, his injuries played into why we're not looking or why Green Bay was maybe pushed to the side, and you look at Minnesota and you look at Detroit respectively. Minnesota's done it. They just win. They've won 8 straight games, Donnie, by 8.6 points per game. They're a 7-1 home football team, only 6 true home games. 1 win came against the New York Jets. That was away, obviously, in Europe, but they've won those 6 games in terms of Minneapolis by an average margin of victory of 13.5 points per game. They are a dominant home team, so when you see the 1.5 number, you do scratch a little bit, but it is a divisional opponent. Green Bay's healthy. You have the emergence of Josh Jacobs. He only had 53 rushing yards in terms of the first matchup, and you have an elite play caller in terms of Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love. If we put the two quarterbacks head to head and we say Darnold and Jordan Love, as great as Sam Darnold's playing, you could say Jordan Love could go toe-to-toe with him at any given time. So I think that's what you're seeing in terms of the 1.5 point number. I do feel Minnesota tries to take away Josh Jacobs today, and that's where I do feel Jordan Love exposes them over the top. I think it's an over, but I'm with I know Kev likes Green Bay. I like Green Bay as well.
So, yeah, for me, I think the side is actually really tricky. I like a prop on the Green Bay side. Right. We'll get to that in a second. But I think what it does really boil down to is they believe the Packers are better, and home field advantage is worth less than it used to be, right? And that's kind of just the simplest way to put it. Within the last 2 weeks, both of these teams went to Seattle to play a game. Green Bay won 30-13. Minnesota won 27-24. Again, wins are wins. But if we do this with Kansas City, I think we could certainly do it with Minnesota. You mentioned the 8-game win streak. They got red hot by playing close games against the Colts, Jaguars, and Titans. That's what it was.
Those were all on the road, right? They were 3. I'm just saying.
The Colts game was at home. Then Titans were on the road.
Right.
Then they went to Chicago, right? And that was a 3-point game. Then they beat Arizona by 1. Then they smashed Atlanta, rolled the Bears, lifeless, and then the 3-point game against Seattle.
Right.
The reality is an 8-game win streak against a lot of lifeless football teams, some close victories as well, and I don't think the books are overly swayed. Where I think the Green Bay Packers have started to shift the perception back to where it was at the beginning of the season, that this team is as good as any in the entire National Football League, and I think that is, again, continuing to bubble. For me, I am keyed in on Jordan Love's passing yards at 250+. It's my favorite wager on the board. The Minnesota secondary is opportunistic, but it is a little bit vulnerable. They're allowing, in the last 6 games, 291.5 yards per game, with 5 of the 6 opposing quarterbacks going for 250+. And I just listed out the teams they played. It wasn't a run of Burrow, Allen, and Lamar going up against this Minnesota secondary. And in that 6-game window, on average, quarterbacks are throwing the football 39.3 times per game. We don't see Jordan Love throw the football 36, 37, 38 times typically. But on this season, when Love has thrown it at least 30 times, in 4 of 5, he's thrown for 250+. If he throws the ball 35+ times within the last 2 years, he's thrown for 250+ in 8 out of 10. To me, Donnie, I think I get volume with one of the best quarterbacks in football in Jordan Love. I think he soars through 250+.
No, and he's going to have to, because I think they're going to be losing in the second half, which means you're going to get extra passes down the stretch. And also you're taking a look at Christian Watson, unlikely to play today, doing the multiple outlets. That is your deep shot. So now you're taking a look at more sustaining of drives, which means more short passes, more completion percentage chances here. And also, if Jacobs can explode in this game, Joe, we always know this, the play-action pass really opens up, and you can get real creative with Matt LaFleur. But I just like the way this defense has played for the entirety of the season with Brian Flores. I just think that home field advantage is just a little bit too much. And yes, if there is a conspiracy theory, they would love to see Minnesota win. But again, Green Bay is a good team. That's why it's -1.5. I'm just giving the slight edge at home today to Minnesota, the way they play Justin Jefferson. I think he steps up in a big moment today.
Yeah, it's a great look. I am curious to see how Minnesota does approach it from an offensive perspective, because I do expect Aaron Jones to really try and take the game over. Last time they played, it was 92 yards. A lot of that was in the second half after they built the first half lead. I think they look to run the football first, work off of play action for Sam Darnold. I think it's the opposite approach for Jordan Love. And the reason why I say that is, you look at the middle part of the year, Minnesota had the second-ranked rush defense in the NFL. They were giving up 75 rushing yards per game. They stuffed the box. They forced teams to beat them over the top. Then what happened was they played more explosive offenses. They started utilizing a lot of blitz packages. They did it against Caleb. They did it against Joe Flacco and some of those teams, and teams started to run on them. Now is a big game. I think they get back to basics. I think they stack the box, force the game onto Jordan Love, and we'll see how this game plays out. Early on, I think it's going to be a great game. It wouldn't shock me if it goes either way. I do lean to Green Bay, but I like the over, Kev. 48.5, I think, is light. I think Jordan Love does have success over the top. We'll see if it's Reed, Wicks, or maybe even Tucker Kraft in terms of the passing game tonight.
I do think one of the very interesting things with this NFC North that has just been dominating teams this season, and they are all very good. I want to make that clear. What's interesting is Minnesota, since their Week 6 bye, has played 2 teams that are projected to be in the playoffs. They lost to both. If you take a look at Green Bay, who are the current projected playoff teams that they've been able to beat this year? Houston, the Rams in Week 5, when that was a much different team. Again, that's the list. This happens occasionally. But one of the big benefits, I think, for the NFC North this year, they drew the AFC South. They've all beaten the Houston Texans, right? But they've all. I mean, have they all swept the AFC South this year in terms of the big 3 teams? If I'm not mistaken,
I think they have.
I mean, a 12-0 against like. Now, listen, you have to beat those teams. I think that's one of the things that has held back the numbers on Minnesota, maybe to some degree Green Bay. But I also think it's what helped push Detroit up to the moon, because Detroit, where Minnesota would play a close game, or Green Bay might play, Detroit would be like, ooh, is that a South team? Yeah, here's 50, right? Yeah. And let's keep this whole thing moving, which has been very fascinating. I want to talk about the top of this conference, and I want to get to something that may or may not matter for tomorrow, but you've already heard the conversation a little bit. If we see a result here for Minnesota, tomorrow's game for Detroit does not matter. Dan Campbell has already said, we are all systems go. Is that a mistake or bravado out of Dan Campbell? We'll talk about that in the NFC outright market next.
As the candles flicker, a new tradition shines. 8 nights of Hanukkah, 8 nights of winning insights.
Like, they may come out slow, so you might be able to get a better number. Wow, they're favored.
With SportsGrid, every night is another chance to win.
No pick sixes today. They cover.
So let's crunch it up. Let's make it happen. Let's give you our favorite props.
Let your Hanukkah winnings brighten your celebrations. Happy Hanukkah from all of us at SportsGrid.
How do you find some of this great talent that you've brought in, who are still early in their career, might not have a ton of tape on them yet?
I've been around this business, man, for almost 20 years. So a lot of these guys will tell you that I popped into a lot of gyms, sparred or just worked on the side or, kind of worked out, just watching. I've always loved this sport, man. I think it's the greatest. And we want to continue to put on the next up-and-coming superstars. We know we got them.
Only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Back right here on SportsGrid, and it looks like we have a good one on our hands. What do I mean by that? Well, the topic of Detroit resting players was just quickly brought up.
Yeah.
And DRS is chomping at the bit.
Love it.
And I'm not surprised, but I want to just once again set the stage for everybody. If Minnesota wins this game, it ensures the division and 1 seed will be on the line in Week 18 for the Lions and the Vikings.
Yes.
Which means Detroit's Monday nighter against the Niners is meaningless. And I know sometimes people hear that and go, well, no, just listen. It has no bearing on their ability to make or miss the playoffs or anything about their seeding. So people have asked Dan Campbell, will you rest on Monday? He has said no, Donnie. What do you think of that?
As holding multiple tickets, I should say, on the Lions, this is... Let's rewind. Let's get into it now. Let's rewind last year. Detroit fans, if you're watching right now, the reason you don't have a Super Bowl is because of your head coach and nothing else last year. The most rock-headed, stupid decisions you could see down the stretch last year. Let's fast forward to this year. You have a game where, correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, today Minnesota plays, right? Does Detroit play today? Oh, you're already at a deficit for 1 day. Where's Minnesota playing today?
Home.
Where is Detroit playing tomorrow?
The Bay Area.
The Bay Area. So you're flying all the way out there, and now you're going to be coming back at this point. So, again, you're already at a deficit. Let's just say you are Detroit, and you're playing this game against San Francisco. Seems like they're going to play as many starters as they can. You play hard, and you lose. So now you're already a little bit worn coming back. Next week you lose that game, and you wind up with the 5th seed as opposed to the 1 seed and heading into the playoffs, basically going on the road either way. And as Kevin pointed out, it's not a game. You don't have to be tough. It's a football game. We play it. No. Why would you play a single meaningful player? Jared Goff should not play. Your 2 tackles shouldn't play. Your top cornerbacks, your pass rushers, and Jahmyr Gibbs. You want to win the football game after that? I'm all for it here. But the fact of the matter is, I would love to now see this scenario play out. Well, Dan Campbell starts all of his starters, and we'll laugh on Monday night when the hamstrings and the knees and the ankles pop up like, called that one. How about that?
Who did they lose to in the NFC Championship game last year?
The Niners.
It's a Billy Club special.
Oh,
That's
boy.
the only reason why.
Billy
That
Club.
is the only reason why they're rolling out there. I honestly believe that Dan Campbell has revenge. He wants to beat that team down in a big way and put them out to pasture, baby.
I can tell you.
Put them out to pasture.
We need this to happen
Take
now.
them outside the barn and shoot them.
I have to move forward to Minnesota.
That's what
Okay.
they're going to do.
More incentive.
Billy Club special.
More incentive.
We just accidentally stumbled into a sell me something.
I love this.
And let me just tell you, if I had to pick a side, Donnie by a million, and it's nothing you did wrong. If Dan Campbell is basing that decision
on.
You know
on
he is.
getting revenge for
You know
last
he
year's
is.
conference
You know he
title
is.
game,
You know he is.
I might go all the way to the
Yeah.
Donnie side that
Yeah.
they should
He's
fire
so
the guy.
smart. He's stupid.
I don't
mean,
think
let's
that's
be honest.
what it is.
You know,
If I had to, now I actually think it's on the board that the result comes in because what Dan Campbell doesn't need to do is tell his guys, "Hey, listen, there's a chance we don't play in this game."
Yeah,
that isn't beneficial. If Minnesota wins, I think there's a chance that Campbell then says, "Look, we might play for a half,
correct.
I play for a quarter, but everything is on the line next week." And at that point, that's all good. If Dan Campbell does go out there and just play normal football, right, or play to win the game, I think it will be justified by it's our identity. We cannot shift our identity with the season on the line. And Dan Campbell would much rather die on his sword, right, than any other way. And that's the Dan Campbell thing, right? There is no doubt in my mind there will be a moment during the postseason where it'll live by the sword, die by the sword. It's who he is. Last year's result, and I know Donnie says you would have won a Super Bowl if it wasn't for Dan Campbell. Well, they wouldn't have advanced out of round one against the L.A. Rams last year if it wasn't for Dan Campbell's aggressiveness. That's just the reality of the situation. So it's an interesting spot to be in. I agree they should rest. But it is college-esque. The atmosphere and the culture that the Lions have created through their head coach.
It is, but that's their identity. And you got to take the good, the bad, and the ugly in terms of these situations. Either you back them all in or you don't back them at all. I think that's the real approach when you take a look at the Detroit Lions. Either you believe in the mentality and philosophy in terms of what they believe in terms of playing their players, particularly at this point. Other coaches like Andy Reid believe in taking rest for certain types of situations, but it is their identity, right? It's a culture within that locker room, and every player that does play believes in the mentality, and that's it. Either you live by it or you don't. And the fans, to your point, Kev, they love Dan Campbell, right? And they believe that style will get them back to the NFC Championship.
Okay.
It's when things happen that Donnie's sitting on the desk on Monday night going, "See, I told you," but it is what it is right now.
In a perfect world, they'll both need that game. They'll both play hard. We won't have to talk about it. But you get, what a major advantage. You have a home football game where you rested your key starters just for this game to be shot out of a cannon. And, Joe, it's not like Green Bay Packers and the Minnesota Vikings is a game that doesn't matter at all. The Packers and Vikings will go toe-to-toe for 60 minutes today and wear each other out. And you're telling me Dan Campbell's going to get that flight, wear his team out for a game that didn't actually matter? Leave it up to Dan Campbell. What are they going to do if they get the number one seed? Are they going to call the Cleveland Browns to have a full scrimmage with clock and referees on that Sunday because that's the way they like to play football and they don't want to miss any time? Rest at the end of the year is the biggest advantage you can have. And he's going to be like, we're not even going to punt in that game.
We're going to run it.
Oh,
Here is though the final question, because then we're going to break down some Eagles-Cowboys. If the Detroit Lions end up the 5th seed, Minnesota the 1, your current NFC outright market, plus 170 Detroit, 360 Eagles, 6-1 Packers, 6-1 Vikings. Who is the favorite to win this conference if Minnesota ends up the 1 seed?
Eagles.
I think the Eagles.
Eagles go.
Eagles, yeah.
Where does Detroit go? 2, 3, 4?
No,
I
I would say they go 3. I would say they go 3.
I would think they would.
And it depends on how these games play out. If Detroit loses 31-30, it's going to be a little bit different. But if you say that final game, they get hammered in it, then they might drop even farther down.
I think Eagles become the favorites.
Yes.
I think Minnesota would a bye automatically into that round. Goes to the number 2 team on the board.
Yeah.
I think Detroit still, though, stays in front of the Green Bay Packers.
Yes.
Be tough. It would be close, but they beat them twice, so you would have to give the edge to the Lions, but still. We'll see how the books price it.
Let's get to Eagles-Cowboys as well as some Sports Millions pick 'em. What's next with you right here on SportsGrid.
The sharpest football contest show in the land. The Las Vegas Football Contest Show focuses on Circus Sports Million, Circus Survivor, and the Westgate Super Contest, handicapping the games and releasing our contest picks every week of the season. With 2 former Super Contest winners, Brady Cannon and James Salinas, a former NFL player, Mike Pritchard, and over $1 million in contest prize money won combined, the Las Vegas Football Contest Show will have you prepared this season like none other.
Uncle Stevie can just walk up the aisle like he's at the supermarket. I'll get a starting pitcher here, I'll get a closer here, I'll get a first baseman here, and he'll just keep throwing things in the cart because there is no limit.
Now he's gone, so they got to go get arms to make that team better. Because the bottom line was they were just outclassed by the Dodgers. Let's face it, they got their ass beat.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
I'm actually not even on a side today.
Yeah.
And I'll get to that. Why are you on Texas?
I gave them a chance. Maybe not me as the overwhelming authority in college football, but entering that game on this set to you guys, I said there was one elite defense entering the matchup in Austin back to end out October. It's not the Bulldogs like it used to be. It is Texas.
College football today, only on SportsGrid.
The 2 guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity. I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results.
What?
How do you do this once?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Live on SportsGrid, Kevin Walsh with you, of course, with Donnie Rightside and Joe Lisi. It is time for your Sports Millions Pick'ems, where we're going to get some options on the board here, and we have a few good higher or lower chances that we can take. But I do want to set the stage a little for Eagles-Cowboys here because it is a very unique game. One team needs it, one team does not. One team, though, is going to a backup quarterback to get his first start of the season. But for Kenny Pickett, DRS, played almost all of last week and is obviously somebody with a lot of starts under his belt, having been the guy for Pittsburgh for 2 seasons. Before we get into any of the Sports Million Pick'em options that really caught my eye, your expectations today from Kenny Pickett specifically?
Serviceable. I don't think you're going to watch this game and say, well, Kenny Pickett's the reason that the Philadelphia Eagles lost to the Dallas Cowboys. There's so many more elements. The Eagles are so much more talented. But also keep in mind, if you're basing it off last week, one final completion at the end of the game on an easy pitch and catch to Devontae Smith. You're not talking about any of this here because the Eagles wrap up the division. Kenny Pickett, fantastic. He played great, but now you're starting to get those little pins and needles out at this point. And also understand this. A quarterback that comes into a week where he had no practice reps, nothing with the starters, you're just hoping that he's focused on the game plan enough. This week, everything is to his liking and how he wants to approach this game plan, and the coaches will adjust accordingly to that, Joe. So I expect a serviceable effort out of Kenny Pickett today.
Play within the scheme, limit turnovers. He throws the interception early. That allowed Washington to cut the deficit 14-7. He gets strip sacked. That allowed Washington to potentially take the lead in terms of the fourth quarter. So limit turnovers. Just play within the scheme. Get the football on checkdowns to your tight end or your running backs coming out of the backfield. Do not turn the football over and allow Dallas an opportunity to steal this game. As long as he does that, they rely on Saquon Barkley. They're going to be just fine.
Which is one of the reasons I think one of the best options for this game on Sports Millions, Jake Elliott, higher, 6.5 kicking points. If you look, last week, his season high came with 15 because he had his season high in field goal attempts, ended up going 4 for 5 in that game. You know, you could make an argument that one thing Philly would need to clean up going into the postseason is their special teams, both kicking and punting. And Jake Elliott has somebody who entered the year, one of the top 5 kickers in football, probably top 3, has maybe been covered for a little bit by the Justin Tucker struggles. But, Donnie, I think for Nick Sirianni, an aggressive coach, some of that probably gets pulled back a little today with Kenny Pickett. Take points when you can get them because the defense likely won't need you to score too many in order for this to be a win.
You would like to see that, too, because even Saquon is a great running back, maybe the best in the NFL, and could have a chance to set the all-time single-season rushing record. But 4th and 2s with Jalen Hurts, that was an automatic because you were too far to sneak it. But you said, you know what, put him in shotgun read option. We're going to walk to this, whether I hand it off or whether I keep it. You don't get that opportunity anymore, which means you're going to have a straight handoff from 2 yards away, or you're going to trust Kenny Pickett to drop back and make a play, which probably won't be with his feet, so somebody's got to be open. So I do agree with that. In a situation where the win is the most important thing, going against a team that you should handle, just stacking up the points every chance you get to force rush to try to counter that, I think that's the way to go. So I agree with that.
Yeah, lower scoring game, rely on your defense. We saw this game play out against Carolina a few weeks ago. They almost got upset. You don't want that situation with a divisional opponent in terms of Dallas, especially you want the special teams to be peaking as you head into the playoffs.
The other option for me from this game is going to be Cooper Rush lower than 32.5 pass attempts. And this is tied through a number of ways in this game. It's how good the Philly defense is. It's the fact that Dallas enters without CeeDee Lamb, which means you're probably not going to want to throw it as much anyway. But this is also feels almost college football-esque, where maybe you see one of the service academies come into town and you think, ooh, wait a minute, lower scoring, limited possessions because we're going to see running. I don't think Cooper Rush will have enough opportunities because we are expecting so much of the football to be ran on the Philly side of things. So I'll go Cooper Rush lower than 32.5 pass attempts. Curiosity for you guys, a touchdown scorer in this game you feel confident about?
I mean, for the game, Saquon.
Yeah.
To hit pay dirt, I think is great.
I don't like anybody from the Cowboys at that point. Underwhelming offensive line, not running weapons. Keep in mind on this, too. How about Kevontae Turpin? He's sitting there around that, 20-yard range. They got to be creative today. So maybe he scores, and you could get that on a punt return at this point. Maybe their best offensive play.
Not bad. A potential look there. Don't forget, again, you get that 3X multiplier when you combine these picks on Sports Millions. We'll continue to break down a great Sunday slate here on SportsGrid.
Sharpest football contest show in the land. The Las Vegas Football Contest Show focuses on Circa Sports Million, Circa Survivor, and the Westgate Super Contest, handicapping the games and releasing our contest picks every week of the season. With 2 former Super Contest winners, Brady Cannon and James Salinas, a former NFL player, Mike Pritchard, and over $1 million in contest prize money won combined, the Las Vegas Football Contest Show will have you prepared this season like none other.
Uncle Stevie can just walk up the aisle like he's at the supermarket. I'll get a starting pitcher here, I'll get a closer here, I'll get a first baseman here, and he'll just keep throwing things in the cart because there is no limit.
Now he's gone, so they got to go get arms to make that team better. Because the bottom line was they were just outclassed by the Dodgers. Let's face it, they got their ass beat.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
I'm actually not even on a side today.
Yeah.
And I'll get to that. Why are you on Texas?
I gave them a chance. Maybe not me as the overwhelming authority in college football, but entering that game on this set to you guys, I said there was one elite defense entering the matchup in Austin back to end out October. It's not the Bulldogs like it used to be. It is Texas.
College football today, only on SportsGrid.
The 2 guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity. I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this one? Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.